Hi guys, this is Mrs. Sassano, and I wanted to share one of my favorite books with you. It's called This Island Isn't Big Enough for the Four of Us by Jerry Greer and Bob Reddick. Kind of a light-hearted, fun story, and I think we can all use that right now. So let's get started. My best friend, Pete Mackenzie, was a little upset. I could tell because his eyes were bulging and because he had me by the shirt collar and was shaking me. "It's for babies," he sputtered. "It's a baby tent. I want to be caught dead in it." I could understand his point of view. It was a baby tent, and I didn't exactly want to be caught dead in it myself, but I wasn't about to admit it. "Pete," I said, "be reasonable. You're jumping to conclusions. I tell you what, let's have another look at it." He let go of me by my collar, and we both stood back and had another look. "It's a sissy tent," he yelled. "No," I countered. "It's just colorful, that's all. It's got character. I think I kind of like it." It was bad, all right. Very bad. Any other tent in the world would have been a big improvement, but the sad fact was that we were stuck with it. I had promised to borrow a tent, and unfortunately, it was the tent I had borrowed. As soon as I had gotten it, I set it up in the backyard and then called Pete on the phone and asked him to come over and see it. Naturally, he came right away. Naturally, because starting the next day, this tent was going to be our home for 7 days. Starting the next day, Pete and I were going to begin the adventure of our dreams, camping out alone on a wild, uninhabited island in the middle of a remote lake. For a whole week, just Pete and me and the wilderness. And, of course, our tent, our very own Hansel and Gretel gingerbread house tent. The deluxe model, the first in a new line of Tiny Tot tents for backyard camping, the cutest, sweetest, most lovable tent. "It's goofy," yelled Pete. "Look at it. It's got little windows with frilly curtains. It's got a chimney with candy canes on it. It's got frosting on the roof." "Yeah," I said, "but look, it's big enough for you to stand up in." Pete glared at me. "The doorknob," he said grimly, "is a big cookie with a face painted on it." Don't you have an awesome mind picture going on right now? I guess you could say it was my fault about the tent, but actually, all I did agree to do my Uncle Ted a favor. Uncle Ted works for this company that designs camping equipment called Gray Wolf Backcountry Supplies. And naturally, when he asked me if Pete and I would field test a tent for him, I said yes. I just assumed it'd be one of your regulation heavy-duty, rough-and-ready explorer-type tents. How could I have known that someone had come up with this Tiny Tot tent idea? Besides, Uncle Ted was also lending us 2 brand new sleeping bags, a bunch of waterproof duffel bags, and a 16-foot aluminum canoe. It seemed only fair that we should do him a favor in return. "What's this?" demanded Pete suddenly. He was bending over a piece of rolled up plastic attached to the tent at the base of the door. Before I could stop him, he started backing away from the tent, unrolling it onto the ground. "That's our sidewalk," I explained. It had little round cobblestones painted on it and a grass trim on either side. Little plastic tulips sprang up as he unrolled it. Pete straightened up and folded his arms across his chest. "I'm not going," he said. I wasn't exactly surprised by Pete's reaction. Ever since we had gotten permission to go on this trip, he had been picturing himself as some sort of rugged backwoodsman or old-time explorer or something. According to Pete, this wasn't going to be just an ordinary camping trip. This was high adventure. This was our big chance to leave behind the namby-pamby comforts of home and survive on our own, to tame nature with our bare hands, to pit our wits against the elements and win. There'd be a bonus, too. When we started school at Franklin Junior High in September, we'd have tanned faces and rippling muscles, and there'd be a strange light in our eyes. One look at us and the other kids would whisper to each other, "Those two have laughed in the face of danger." At least that was Pete's theory. As for me, I figured I'd be happy if we just did a little swimming, a little fishing, and a little exploring. And if we got some clear nights, I was hoping I could use my binoculars to make a few simple astronomical observations, like checking out the great galaxy Andromeda and great globular cluster in Hercules and the Cygnus star cloud. Astronomy is a big interest of mine. So I was planning on taking my Astronomy with Binoculars book and my best star map too. Of course, none of this was going to happen unless I could convince Pete not to let a little thing like a tiny tot tent with frosting on the roof stand in the way of high adventure. Look, Pete, I reasoned, what difference does it make what the tent looks like? There won't be anyone else on the island to see it. Pete still looked grumpy, but he couldn't argue with that. We'd done some research on Turtle Island, and as far as we could learn, no one ever went there. There were a few cabins along the shore of the lake, but the island itself was totally wild. Maybe, he grumbled, eyeing the candy canes. But it's the principle of the thing. How could anyone sleep in there without feeling like a 2-year-old? We don't actually have to sleep in it, I pointed out. We can just set it up and store our stuff inside, and only sleep in it if it rains. I don't know, said Pete, weakening. Besides, I went on, we don't have time to borrow another tent before tomorrow. And we can't postpone the trip. What if our parents get cold feet and they call the whole thing off? Pete thought it over, muttering to himself and kicking at a tulip. It hadn't been easy talking our parents into letting us go in the first place. 2 12-year-old boys camping out alone? Too dangerous, they said. We'd freeze or starve or drown or get eaten alive before the first day was over. But Pete and I didn't give up. We started working on them at the beginning of the summer and kept at it, slowly wearing them down. And just to let them know we were serious, we took a 3-week course in canoeing down at the YMCA. The big break finally came when my parents volunteered to spend their vacation at a small rickety old lodge right on the shore of Lost Lake. That way, Pete and I could stay on Turtle Island, about 3/4 of a mile out in the lake. If we ran into any trouble, we promised that we would send up emergency signal flares. So everybody was happy. Pete's mother, who had grown up on a cattle ranch in Montana, said she guessed maybe this was a good opportunity for us to learn a little self-reliance in the great outdoors. And Pete's father agreed with her. Meanwhile, my father said he looked forward to getting in a little serious fishing. And my mother said she could use the peace and quiet to catch up on her book reviews that she writes. Pete and I might never get another chance like this, and Pete knew it. What's it like inside? Said Pete, frowning at the gumdrops around the door of the tent. He pulled open the flap and peered in. I wouldn't go in there. I tried to warn him. Pete disappeared inside. Didn't think he was going to be very happy to find out that the inside was painted too. It looked just like the inside of a cozy little cottage. A muffled croak came from inside the tent. A witch? I guess he had seen the Wicked Witch painted on the wall over by the painted fireplace. She had a big sugary smile on her face and was holding a platter of cupcakes. On the front of her black dress, right over her heart, she was wearing a small white badge. It had colorful little lettering that said, "Don't be naughty, don't be mean, keep your hands and facey clean." Facey? Yelled Pete in an outraged voice. He came charging out of the tent. Facey? He demanded. I should have known better than to joke at a time like this, but I couldn't help it. That's right, Pete, I said very seriously. And don't forget to wash behind your earsies too. Pete wouldn't speak to me for the next half hour. And that's the first chapter, and we'll do the second one later.